Welcome, Thomas J. Rush, to the Wholesome Crypto podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Sure.
Yeah, and for everyone that doesn't know Thomas J. Rush, the people call him Jay, so we'll refer to you that. But he is the co-founder of TrueBlocks, and that is having the Ethereum blockchain on your computer, where you can actually sort through it and look through it without all of that lag and burn, and kind of like a quick way to view it without using some other third-party source. So Jay, you've been into the crypto scene for a long time. You've been heavy in Ethereum. You have been writing articles and educating people more on like the protocol level, things that a lot of developers like to know, and people like me that do not develop but are just interested in the tech value a lot. So thank you so much for educating us and sharing your knowledge. But before you even heard about crypto, before you even heard about Ethereum, what were you doing? Where were you in life?
I was teaching poetry.
Poetry. So
Yes.
you always had a way with words?
I suppose I did. I was prior to Ethereum, probably about 7 years prior to Ethereum, I tried to become a writer.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was going to be a novelist, and I learned that my stories were boring. I wasn't a good novelist, but I loved words, and I really found out that I loved poetry. So I actually spent about 7 years studying. I got a master's degree in poetry, and I was teaching poetry and writing at a community college in my hometown, which is Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. I thought it was the greatest thing in the world.
And what
And
type of like genre were you into?
I love like early 1800s poetry. I think there was like six poets that were just amazing.
Wow.
Six, you know, they're white men poets, which is maybe appropriate, being that I'm a white man, so I wasn't exactly reading broadly, but I
Mhm.
was very deeply into it. So, um,
Awesome.
but I was I was in love with poetry for about 7 years. Prior to that, I was in love with furniture designing for about 7 years.
Diverse.
So, because I just couldn't stand not, I had to make furniture. I had to build something with my hands. And
Mm-hmm.
then prior to that, I was into the internet. So I, and then since 7 years, I've been into crypto. So I'm kind of a type of person who just digs
Yeah.
deep into something, whatever I'm interested in. I kind of stopped worrying about holding myself back from digging into what I'm interested in.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, so that's what I was doing the past 28 years.
Wow. So, but were you always a little bit curious about tech? I mean, or
Always.
okay,
Oh,
so the internet
oh.
was like amazing
Well,
to you and interesting, or was that?
I'm fairly older than most people in the space, so I was actually very, very interested in desktop computers when they first came out, like in the early 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a desktop computer in my house. And I tell people that I every 10 years or something, my head is on fire about some technology. So back in the 80s, I was running around telling everybody about desktop computing and how it's the most amazing thing in the world. Right. And then 10 years later, I'm running around telling everybody about the internet. It's the most amazing thing in the world. And then I veered off into poetry. It's the most amazing thing in the world. You know, and then like 7 years ago, I heard of I was really into IoT stuff
Yeah.
in late 2015. And if you read anything about IoT in 2015, you were definitely reading about crypto.
Yeah.
And I just, my brain just went on fire for crypto in 2015. Um,
Did someone tell you about crypto or Bitcoin, or did you kind of stumble upon it
uh,
yourself browsing the internet?
yeah, I had stumbled upon Bitcoin probably 2013, and I spent like one summer just reading everything about Bitcoin. And this was just prior to Bitcoin's first real run up into like I think it was around 800 or $1,000 or
Oh
something.
yeah.
And I kept saying to myself, this is really interesting. I should buy. And then it went up to like 800. And like 2 days later, Mount Gox
Yep.
happened. It went back down to like 100 or something. So
Oh
then
man.
I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. It's never going to work. And I just forgot about it completely. And then in 2015, late 2015, I first heard about Ethereum through IoT,
Okay.
and in particular Slockit, which was this project that turned into the DAO. So it was just all so exciting back then. It was like so cool.
And was it so I guess yeah, you're saying Bitcoin was interesting, but didn't really create any spark in you.
Well, it did to the extent that I thought it was one of the most fascinating things I've ever heard of,
Hmm.
because how fascinating is Bitcoin? You know, a piece of software creates money. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like literally just the
That's his
most
job.
amazing. It's just unbelievable, right? And then I had to try to figure out like how does that happen? What is that? I didn't understand anything, and I just read a lot. Very skeptical of it because it didn't make sense. And
Mm.
then it crashed, and then I knew that my skepticism was right, right? So then I kind of walked away from it for about 2 years. But being a software engineer, as soon as I saw Ethereum and you could write software on the chain, as
Yeah.
soon as I saw that, I'm like, yeah, this is something really interesting.
That's
So
interesting. When did you start learning software development?
1982.
So that was also a part of you. So do you have any like link or draw between poetry and software development?
You know what? I always wanted to write, always. And I think that writing software is really revision. It's like you're constantly revising what you're writing. So to me, software and the act of writing are very similar because it's basically fingers on a keyboard, brain putting
Yeah.
thoughts into a keyboard, right?
Making a puzzle or
Yeah.
solving a puzzle.
Yeah. So I kind of shifted from writing code every day to writing, you know, first novels every day and then poetry. And it wasn't really a very hard shift because it was really just writing every day.
Mm.
So, um, and I always loved words, and I thought I was going to be a novelist, and it's not that I wasn't good at writing; it was just that I wasn't interested in
Yeah.
telling stories. I was more interested in the words. So,
Gotcha. And that's awesome because yeah, in the development world, it's a whole new language, sort of like
yeah,
JavaScript, Python, whatever, HTML. So using your skills in poetry, definitely, I can see how that's very impactful in creating functions and variables that make sense most
yeah,
efficiently for what you need to create.
you have to make it make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So then now you're diving into Ethereum. You're seeing that, oh, now I can write onto the blockchain, right into the space directly. That's the whole purpose of Ethereum, is creating your own apps
right,
in a kind of like a decentralized worldwide computer.
right.
What was your first intuition, and this is the first like project that made you really get into
It was absolutely the DAO.
the
With
DAO?
so I got into the DAO probably a month and a half before it went on sale.
Mm-hmm.
That was May of 2016. And, it was just such a crazy thing because none of it made sense. None of the tools worked. You know, everybody was speaking language that you just never heard. I hadn't heard before in my life, like, public good, and we're going to solve the prisoner's dilemma and game theory and all
Yeah,
this, just these fascinating ideas. And then, so I was in the DAO space and I was like looking at the source code as it was being built. Um, I wrote this website that I took each line of code and I kind of wrote what I thought it was doing. So I had like these two sides, and one would have the code and one would have what I thought it was happening on the code. And just totally into it. And then the the sale happens, the DAO
yeah,
sale happens, and it goes from like people thinking we might raise a million or 2 million or 5 million or 8 million to 60, 70, 150 million dollars, and everybody's like, what in the world just happened, right?
Where's all this money coming from?
It was unbelievable. And then the whole point of the DAO, at least from my perspective, was that it was a shared thing that everybody who wanted to could see what was happening on the
Hmm.
smart contract. But if you actually tried to look to see what was happening on the smart contract, you couldn't see anything. You couldn't get the data that you wanted because the tools were not there. So people were going to Etherscan, and to me, that was just like, I thought we were decentralized. Why is everybody going to a website? It just never made sense.
Hmm.
Um, and even when you went to Etherscan back at that time, you couldn't really see very much. You could just see blocks and bytes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So the the promise of the thing was that we'd have this shared access to this thing, because then we could solve the prisoner's dilemma. Because part of the problem with the prisoner's dilemma is that you have to trust what's happening in the system. And by being able to see into the system with perfect clarity, you don't need to trust because you can just see it.
Yeah.
But nobody could really see it. So
That's true.
it,
You're trusting Etherscan to have the
yeah,
correct information, which,
yeah, which was all and that was all kind of built into what I thought we were building, which was a perfectly clear way to see into stuff. And that's kind of when I started my project TrueBlocks, because I wanted to say, well, look, I'm not interested in just another website or just another Web 2 endeavor. I'm interested because I want to see what it actually looks like to decentralize the computing environment that we're working in. Um,
interesting.
so I said to myself, I'm going to figure out how to run a node myself. I'm going to figure out how to put a node on my own machine. I'm going to figure out why it's so hard to see into the blockchain. I'm going to figure out how I can get what I want, which is my own behavior on the blockchain. And none of that stuff was available except by going to Etherscan or some other third party indexing
Hmm.
solution. So that's where TrueBlocks kind of started right there. Um,
Nice. So, I mean, it's amazing because yeah, all I use is Etherscan or similar websites like that. Never thought of. I mean, I knew the possibility of downloading the entire Ethereum blockchain onto my laptop or computer, but I also know it's a lot of data. I've remember doing that for like Bitcoin wallets back in the day. You had to download the entire
right.
blockchain just to use a Bitcoin wallet.
That's right.
And yeah, and it was obviously annoying. So I'm curious again why people don't use nodes now is because either expensive to buy the hardware or expensive just to buy 2 terabytes of space. And not only that, it's a lot of technical burden for someone who's not uh,
Yeah.
used to
Yeah.
like building or developing. So what was your idea like, or how do I make this easy for people like me, like people who just aren't that familiar with all this?
Well, I kind of ignored the fact that it was hard and a little bit expensive because I wanted to get there. I wanted to
Hmm.
like
Oh
go
yeah.
there, and see what it was like to build software out there, right? I remember back in the '90s, people would say, "I'm going to watch YouTube," or "I'm going to watch video of
Yeah.
you," and we would try to watch video. And it was like a 10,000th of a second long video, and it would take an hour to download or something. So um, I always just thought eventually, I tell people that eventually blockchains will be installed in your operating system. They will come on your computer. Your computer will have 200 terabyte hard drives, and 198 terabytes of your hard drive will be devoted to the blockchain. And no one will care, because we love the idea of this accessible, visible data without a third party. That's what I know. It's crazy. I can see on your face you think I'm a little crazy,
No, I as a
and the
person.
reason I say, the
Sorry.
reason I say that is because in the '90s, everybody would say, "You are insane if you think we're gonna be watching video on the internet."
Mhm.
Every would have said that.
I love that. Like that's what I want actually. I want to fully own, have a fully decentralized application. I am for locally hosting if I can,
Right.
or at least everyone's hosting their own network and creating some type of mesh.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, but it's weird to me is because the world seems to love the idea of having almost nothing on their
Mhm.
computers, phones, just a keyboard and monitor, and then all they gotta do is plug in an Ethernet cord or just connect to Wi-Fi. Then their whole entire lives are there for them
I
almost
agree.
instantly.
Now, you
Like,
see, but the problem that you're gonna have there, if you do that, is that somebody else has that data.
yeah,
And
Google.
if you want it, you know, they're either gonna be nice and just give it to you for free, or much more likely, they're gonna give it to you for free, but they're gonna extract from you something that's super valuable, which is your privacy and your behavior on the web.
hmm
So we make this trade-off all the time. Every time I click on anything, 20 different companies know exactly what I clicked on, and they probably even know why I clicked on it, right?
Yep.
Um, and that's the cost of not having privacy. And you talked to Lefteris a couple
hmm
shows ago. He said he's totally into this idea too. It's like if you want to be private, you kind of have to be private.
Oh yeah, I love what he's building too because same thing like you. It's
Right.
finally an accounting solution or a portfolio manager. That's his app is Rotsky app.
Right.
Completely just like completely open source, private, locally. Everything is locally based on your machine. He doesn't even know what's going on, so it's hard for him to troubleshoot sometimes. But that's the
Right.
whole point of it.
Right.
It's
Because
yours.
would anyone want to have anyone look at their finances? Why it's none of their business. It's a terrible idea to share it.
Yep.
Having said all that, we also want to have these things like the DAO or something where we all join in together and we all know what everyone's doing. So you have this sort of two-sided thing. One is you want to be private,
hmm
you want to be so public that everybody can see everybody else. And I think you have to kind of handle both of those cases. And um, if we don't have our own data, we can't even make the choice to stay private. We don't even have the possibility if the data is somewhere else.
And was the idea of like privacy as a whole something you've always, I guess, wanted for yourself, or did it kind of like, like kind of saw the internet come to life, so you
Yeah,
were slowly starting to see these companies extract data
yeah.
from users? Was it
Well,
one day you woke up like, oh shoot, like all my
I,
data is there?
I remember that when we first started building web servers in the mid, 1993 or four, we were starting to build server applications. By 97 or so, people were saying, "Hey, look at these logs that we're putting here, These logs are really interesting." And everybody was so excited because we could see what our applications were doing through the logs.
Yeah.
But then I remember reading scientific papers where people were, you know, studying human beings through the logs of a server. And everybody was, "This is so fascinating. We have social science. We can do social science like never before." And everybody was excited that we could see human beings behave.
Yeah.
And that turned into a real shit show, really.
Yeah. Now people
And
are
then
spooked
I,
out.
and then I kind of lost interest because the dream of this beautiful internet where everybody shared information and everybody had a voice that could speak kind of died away, and it became they're watching everything we do. I don't know that I thought like that, but it just lost its interest to me. So
hmm
then I wanted to build furniture, basically.
I don't blame you. Sometimes I get that way too. I'm like heavy into a project, then all of a sudden it's just not going in the direction
Right.
that I feel passionate about. And I'm like, all right, time to
Yeah.
reorganize my thoughts somewhere else and then maybe come back to it at a later date.
And then that's what happened when I saw Bitcoin, because all of the dreams, all of the things that we thought we were building in the mid to early 90s, you know, shared information, everybody has a voice, was coming back in newer terms, but the same kind of ideas of
Hmm.
this shared computing environment can be so much better than it is. So that's kind of one of the things that really lit me up when I first heard of Ethereum, because that's what everybody was talking about back then.
Yeah. And yeah, today they're still talking about it. Yeah, Ethereum definitely had an amazing history too. Like
Yeah,
it just remember during their yeah, during like the fork between Ethereum Classic and Ethereum,
and that whole thing was crazy.
that was wild. And I feel like people always for not forget that, but like we're still in such a development phase of everything in the whole blockchain crypto industry, and as it grows more and more is almost less and less forgiveness of the idea that human beings are building this.
Yeah,
But I mean, yeah, Ethereum has shown a lot of strength now, especially compared to other.
yeah, and that whole thing because it was like this $150 million sale by the end of May, and now we have this voting platform, right?
Hmm.
And everybody's so excited about voting, putting up proposals. I studied every proposal. I'm like watching what's happening, trying to figure out what's going on. And then it gets hacked, and then everybody's like, "Oh my God, what's going on?" And then and I was sort of not knowledgeable enough to really know what a fork meant, right?
Hmm.
And so a fork happens, and all of a sudden I have two coins on two different things. And I have twice as many coins as I had before, right? And the ones the price or the activity or price or number of blocks per second or something started diverging, and the ETC kind of went down, but
Hmm.
then it started coming back up in price, and then everybody's like, "Holy shit!" It's like insane, because I had twice as much money. The price fell almost in half,
Hmm.
like the day that the hack happened, and then the price on both sides was somewhat equal for a little while. So it was like, but just that whole idea of, first of all, just money on a computer on a thing where it wasn't from a government or a bank or something like that, and then two monies on a computer 10 seconds later, you know,
Yeah, and
mind blowing. It was mind blowing.
it is, and it is mind blowing, and but it always goes down to like what is money, and it's just whatever people value it,
Right.
whatever people want to value it as, and the
But
struct.
how weird is it that some people just wrote a piece of software and they taught us that that's what money is? It's just an agreement among people that this is a good thing. We like this.
Yep. And I'm always forever grateful for that in the crypto industry with Bitcoin, Ethereum. They really taught me lessons that school never taught me. Like I never learned this in school. I
I agree.
never learned this anywhere, but understanding what money is and like even like the legal um like amendments and whatever, like
Right.
what how money was all started and like or 1971, how that all happened with Nixon and what happened to the gold standard
It's crazy.
and then like also like how you're saying game theory and the prison theory, like
Yeah.
all these different psychological, emotional, monetary
Right.
ideas have come to life and understanding to like a lot of people that would have never otherwise looked into it.
But it came in an engineering way. Like
Hmm.
people wrote lines of code that touched those really human things like emotion and belonging and trusting and all those things that you would never think a piece of software could touch,
Yep.
right? And that's what's so crazy is that I think Bitcoin is like one of the great ideas in human history, not in the last 30 years or something like that. I'm talking about the last 500 years. I think it's one of the most amazing ideas. So, how could you not get excited about that?
I know. And we're definitely heading towards that global decentralized monetary system. It's just
I actually think we're headed exactly the opposite. We're headed into 10 people owning all the money in the world. But
all the crypto in the world or all the what do you mean by money?
Well, first of all, yeah, it'll all be crypto. I say things that are kind of ridiculous sometimes, but I kind of like doing that, so I do it
I like
anyway.
hearing it, and I like most likely you'd be surprised how many people probably agree with you, but
Yeah. All money will be crypto, and then, 40 people will figure out a way to get it all in their own wallet, and somehow they'll just figure it out. And then we'll all be complaining and saying, "We need to change the world." And then somebody will invent a brand new thing that will revolutionize everything and upset everything. So that's just how things work. But
that's kind of like history repeats itself, right? We're gonna create something amazing to disrupt something old,
yeah,
love
and
it, grow it,
yeah,
disrupt it again.
yeah, right.
It's a cycle.
And because people are they like to have everything in a package and they don't really like to do it themselves. They want to get somebody else to do it for them.
Exactly.
That's kind of why those people who are resourceful enough to actually do it for people, they get the reward of doing it, you know? And then I think I don't think people like um, Facebook or Google kind of set out to become these massive, influential groups of people. I think it just kind of happened accidentally, you
Yeah,
know?
totally. Because yeah, Google. I'm sure Google's like, let's make a search engine, but I don't think they were thinking about let's
Yeah.
own half the world's smartphone industry
Right, right. And let's be able to influence everybody with a simple change of a algorithm or something like that.
and shoot satellites in the sky so we have GPS with
Right,
everybody. It's like they weren't. If
right.
they were, that's amazing prediction, but I don't
No,
think
that's
they were.
amazing. Yeah, they're more amazing than I thought they were.
But that
Yeah,
makes sense because what you're saying is like exchanges, centralized exchanges. That's the perfect example of how that entity can own or 40 exchanges can own the world's money
that's
just
right.
by providing a service.
That's right. And we go there because we don't take the time to think about what the implication of going there is, right?
Hmm.
And then what happens, and you saw this happen with like search engines, is because some are better than others. Nobody wants to use the second or third or fourth best one. They want to use the best one because it's better, and then it gets better the more and more people use it.
Hmm.
Because there's more searches, there's better data coming in, so they can provide better results. All of that feeds into a massive Google that runs the blockchain, right?
Exactly.
Let's say there's a Google that runs the blockchain. That's terrible. That's a horrible future.
Well, that's kind of like almost like a ledger too, like our ledger wallets or like Tether wallets. Yeah, they're hardware wallets with cryptocurrencies that we will forever own in our possession. But if you use like the Ledger Live Manager on your computer or the Tether Manager on your computer, something like that, or MetaMask, they're
Right.
watching everything you're doing.
It seems that they probably are. If they aren't now, they will be a couple generations from now.
Hmm. So like you might own it, but it's also being watched, and that's the whole idea. I wish is like, how do we protect ourselves from people's eyes? And that's why what you're building with TrueBlocks is super useful.
Yeah, no, I mean that's kind of what I wanted to do was like, it's so easy just to build something that I think falls back down into the old way of doing web. So just get rid of that completely and just see what happens when you build a piece of software that's not on the web. There's actually some really interesting things that happen. So, for example, if you are running your own, you asked before about why people don't run nodes.
Hmm.
So, one of the reasons I think is, first of all, it is a little bit difficult to stand it up. You have to get a certain size of a hard drive and you have to devote a machine to it, kind of. So, it's a little bit of a pain in the ass there. But then, even if you do run your own node, I think that the way you query the node is inadequate. I think it was built. I tell people that the people that are writing the node software are very interested in making sure that the node stays synchronized with the network because that's its first task. But the RPC is its second task, and you have to query if you want to get data from a node, you query through an RPC interface. And I think that's really inadequate, the RPC interface. So even if you do run your own node, you can't really get useful, good data from the node because the querying sucks.
Okay.
So what we did is we said, why does the query suck? What sucks about the querying? And I think it's that there's no index.
Mm.
And that's why we needed to build an index so that we could do really nice queries for my account or for your account or for some set of accounts that we want to look at. You can do that with the RPC, but it's not easy.
So I guess for our listeners, can you give a quick explanation of like how TrueBlocks, what TrueBlocks is, and what the difference is by having that in your node versus
So it's
standard?
a piece. So the node software runs continually,
Hmm.
and every 15 seconds it finds a block and it writes the block to a database. And TrueBlocks does a similar thing. It runs continually and it asks for new blocks as soon as they come. And it takes each new block and it looks at every possible place in the block. And there's about 30 different places for addresses in the data. And we just scan, we go, from the block, we go to all the transactions, from the transactions, we go to all the receipts, then we go to all the traces. We go basically everywhere we can possibly go in a block to find addresses.
Hmm.
And now we have a list of addresses in that block, and we write that to a database basically. So we have an index. So when we say later, show me every place on the chain where Jay Rush's address ever appeared, we can find it really quickly.
Wow.
And then we can query the blockchain again, but we query for very specific things. We're asking for this transaction, and then we skip ahead 7 weeks and we get another transaction. We skip ahead 10 weeks and we get another transaction. And now we can do what I call a reconciliation, which means I know what my balance is at the beginning of a block. And I think I know what the transaction should have done to my account balance for tokens or for NFTs or anything like that. And then I check at the end of the block. So I check at the beginning. I know what transactions happened. I simulate those transactions to the end, and then I check at the end, and then I call that reconciled. And what that shows me is that I know every transaction on my account, um, because I've reconciled every transaction on my account.
Yeah.
It's just like a bank reconciliation, exactly like that. And if you go to any of these third-party sites that say they're going to do your taxes or do your accounting for you,
Yep.
it doesn't balance. The accounts
It
don't
doesn't.
balance. Like, and that's just, it's literally beyond insane to me that we have an 18 decimal place accurate ledger that comes to perfect balance on 170 million accounts every 14 seconds. And you cannot get a balanced reconciliation. It just is insane. So that's kind of what TrueBlocks lets you do because we look at every block, because we index it, and we do a couple things kind of crazily. We dig really, really, really deeply into the block data, and we get what we call every appearance of every address.
Wow.
So, but then we had another problem. Now we had like a totally different problem. We have this really excellent index, um, and now we want to say to people, it would be great for us to give you this index. We want to give it to you, and they say, "Oh, that's so interesting. I totally want that." And we say, okay, first get a 2 terabyte hard drive, get a new machine, run your own node, and
Yep.
6 months later you're synchronized, and then we'll give you software. So it's just a nightmare. And the alternative would be to put that index up on a website and deliver it like a third party. But now we're just a third party, just like every other thing. So we did something else where we tried to use IPFS
Hmm.
to deliver this data. Um, and then publish the location on IPFS where people can go to get the data. And we publish into a smart contract that we call Unchained Index. and we do that about once a week.
Okay.
And what people can do is they can read that location on IPFS and download the entire index themselves without having to build it themselves.
Wow.
And then they can do a query and get the list of all the transactions that they were ever in, and then they can go to Infura or something like that to get the actual data.
That's wild.
And that's why Lefteris is kind of interested in our work because he wants to balance and reconcile, and because there's no good place to query where you can actually get reconciled transactions, he has to kind of have holes in his data when he's done. So he's really interested in our work, and we're totally interested in his work as well because he gives us a nice interface and it looks nice and it
Yeah.
you know
It's
does
definitely a good matchup.
yeah. So we're constantly talking to each other, but we can't quite figure out how to dance together yet, but we're working on
I have faith.
it.
So, being in this crypto industry for, for like 7 years or more, and working on TrueBlocks and developing your business, developing on this, what do you do for fun? I mean, crypto's a 24/7 industry. It's constantly bombarding you. How do you how do you keep your mind off of crypto if you want to?
I never want to. I swear to God. I swear to God. I never want to.
That's amazing.
I
Most
wake
people,
I wake up every morning. I'm like 5:30 in the morning. I'm like wide awake. I'm like
five.
programmed. I'm kind of insane. I'm like out of control a little bit. You know what I was saying before is I don't stop myself from being in love with what I'm doing.
Hmm.
It's my favorite thing to do is to see a beautiful chart that I drew or something like that. You know what I mean?
That's awesome. I mean, it's
I was the same way with furniture. I was the same way with poetry. I'm just like I I long ago gave up the idea that I'm gonna be like normal. I don't even care anymore, right? It's not health. I'm not saying it's healthy or anything.
it sounds healthy. I feel like you're, doing what you love that
Yeah,
makes you happy.
it's not like I'm ever complaining about what I'm doing. I love it. I love it.
That's I think that's hard for most people to say because I feel like actually my love for like learning about new tech or like just diving deep into whatever I'm doing was lost during college. Like I
Yeah,
just college kind of like just made me feel like you should
yeah,
just get a degree and
yeah, that's right.
do your thing and not.
Yeah. I tried that actually. I tried that. Like when I graduated from college in '86, and I was doing something that was just not interesting, and I did it for about 8 years, and I couldn't even I couldn't even get out of bed to go to work, kind of,
Yeah.
and what was happening to me is I was on the weekends or something like that. I'd go to the library. Back then, you didn't have the internet even.
Hmm.
I'm serious. And I would read about computer science because I just found it fascinating and I wanted to understand computer science on the weekend. That's what I would do for fun on the weekend. And
That's
then I'd have to get up and go to work all week. Just like, I can't do this anymore.
that's how I felt too. That's
You got to just dive off and hope for the best.
I
Yeah.
totally agree. And I feel like now is a time in my life where I'm feeling like I'm starting to feel that fire, and
Yeah.
just keep going for crypto. Let me see like what I like doing.
Yeah.
This podcast. So it's a lot of fun for me too. And I
Yeah.
definitely feel that. So now that you love crypto so much and you're in it, but I would like to know what is your crypto pet peeve?
Third party websites are just nuts to me. It just makes no sense to me. And also that it doesn't balance
Hmm.
that just is so crazy. I can't imagine that we don't pay attention to the fact that we have this thing that doesn't balance. It's just weird.
I didn't even know that was an issue until you told me about it. So it's like also part of the thing is
I
like,
just I paid like I paid like $200 for a website that was going to tell me all of my transactions for my taxes, right?
hmm.
And I downloaded all this stuff and I was looking at what they were telling me. And I have TrueBlocks, so I can get my own list and see what I tell myself. And it was they were missing probably 25% of all the things that happened on my wallet they weren't telling me about. And then I was looking at what they were saying as far as gains and losses on my transactions. They missed the biggest transaction by tenfold. Like I have like all these transactions, and then one was like this amazing lucky break kind
Hmm.
of, and they missed that one completely. It wasn't even in the list. And I'm like, it's,
What's
it
the
doesn't
point?
make yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me. So that's my pet peeve is that we're so careless about it.
Yeah, that makes sense because yeah, for me, it's like I feel like I have to make sure I manually look at my transactions because
Yeah, why? That's
it's
ridiculous.
it's the
Isn't
only
that?
it's the only way. Thankfully, I don't do much because I just can't afford much. But like
Yeah,
I just enjoy dabbling in whatever I can at whatever times. But like yeah, it's just like what
yeah.
am I
Like why?
looking at? How do I
Like why do you
report
have to
this?
do? Why do you have to do it manually? Like, I have to take out my piece of paper and a pencil, and I have to like add it on paper.
It's like we're back in the
It's
checks
crazy.
and balances, like handwritten
That's right. Yeah,
checkbooks to make sure everything is going according to plan. You have to
right.
make sure you're matching up with the bank so they don't mess up.
That's
It's-
right.
We're in the same
I mean,
phase, but for crypto.
it's kind of weird because the bank never messes up. It's always right. It's
Mm,
always. I mean,
yeah,
well, unless there's a hack or something like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah. So
now, do you think, hypothetical, if you didn't, maybe Ethereum also brushed by you like Bitcoin did, like you're interested, but you never got into it. What would you be doing today? What would your life look like?
I'd be writing,
Writing?
absolutely writing. Yeah, definitely.
Man, I want to read some of your novels.
No, trust me, you don't.
I'm not
It's
much.
I truly not.
All right, I'll keep it for you.
Like we were in this. I did this one novel class in my master's program.
Hmm.
We had to write a novel in like 12 weeks. We had 12 weeks to write a full novel. And I got to the point in my writing where it was so ridiculously bad that I couldn't write another word. And I was just sitting there laughing out loud at how I had like trapped myself in a plot twist that was just like never going to resign. It was just so ridiculous.
You back yourself into a corner and see if you can get out of it.
But then it was really interesting because then I just accidentally took a poetry class and I just loved it like immediately because I didn't have to think of what the people were going to be doing next.
Yeah, it's true.
Because you have to constantly like my one novel, I realized that my characters were walking around town in every chapter. This is all and then I got bored with that. So then they got bicycles and they were riding bikes around.
Just don't- you just keep them moving. That's all that matters.
Yeah, and then they went on a boat for a little while. So yeah, I wasn't a novelist.
Well, it's good that you try because yeah, I definitely am lacking that skill set, and I've trying my best to write some at least like
Yeah,
articles online to help out with that. But
yeah. So yeah, but I would write probably because I
nice.
really I loved doing that.
Hey, maybe you can write something
Yeah,
like
maybe.
there's some like great crypto books too. Like
Sorry.
the Cryptopians just came out, and
Yeah, that was good. Yeah.
I enjoyed Digital Gold a lot. That's like real life historic novel almost. It was nice.
Right.
Now, for my last questions I wanted to ask you is what is your favorite wholesome crypto moment? Something that warmed you up that happened in the crypto space, made you smile.
I don't know. I guess we got a grant from the Ethereum Foundation back in 2018,
Nice.
and soon after we got the grant was Osaka um, DevCon 4 or something like that, maybe 5. I can't remember. Um, but they had a dinner for the grantees, and we met like 30 people that had all just gotten the grant. so it was really a great night, and we met Nick Fett there.
Nice.
He got a grant the same time we did, and it was just really made a lot of really nice friends through that grant program. That was great.
That's amazing. I love the
Yeah.
community of Ethereum so
Yeah.
much.
No, it's amazing, and I think it stems from, like, something about Vitalik, like, I've never seen him kind of be cross or be angry or, maybe he is or isn't, I have no clue, but he doesn't come across that way at all. He always kinda tries to navigate a path that he stays above the fray kind of,
Hmm.
and I think that's great. That was another thing when I first joined the community, every single person was so nice, welcoming, wanting to work together,
Yeah.
open, excited, everything. So,
Yeah. They're like, you know, working on the path that they want to see the future in.
right.
Exactly. An open, decentralized community
That's
for the
right.
world.
That's right. And at that time, Bitcoin was everybody was screaming at each other in Bitcoin, so it was pretty drastic difference between the two.
Hmm. Yeah. That's the thing too. Ethereum allows you to continue to use Ethereum, but also go off with your own ideas if you wanted to, with all those different projects and different side chains or coins built on top of Ethereum. So it's like, yeah, you're like kind of like free to do whatever you want on the Ethereum ecospace. So you still would use it and continue with your own idea. Where Bitcoin's kind of like you're kind of stuck.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, the community's great. I love that.
Hmm.
Are you traveling this coming up or?
No, I went to ETH Denver,
Yeah.
but other than that, I'm not seeing much of it after that. But hope so.
To anyone who's listening, I'll be in Amsterdam and maybe we'll meet up there. Find me in Amsterdam.
Awesome. I
Yeah.
hope, man, I wish I can go, but unfortunately I can't. Okay, well, thank you so much, Jay. I really appreciate your time here today. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's great learning about you. You've been in the space for so long, so it's so great to hear everything that you know.
Great.
And really, what you're building with TrueBlocks, I'm excited to see it grow. I'm excited to see it become more of a standard for everybody else.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. See you, everyone.
Thanks for taking the time.
Bye.
So long.